tell me a little bit about you and what you do, and your background, how you got to this place, and how the whole podcast thing has kind of the genesis of it, and how it's evolved over time.
For sure. So, originally I was in a band. I'm a musician. Did it for about 10 years with this band called Dissever. We toured around the U.S., put out a couple albums, and that kind of evolved. Obviously musicians don't make a whole ton of money. Maybe yourself. You've got.
Well, I mean, if you luck into the right situation and you can maintain it, there's money to be made. But
sure,
it's tough to get to that place.
Yeah. So from there, I got a job working in the beer industry, just as a sales rep for different brands, and I would show up at concerts with big coolers full of beer. And one of my friends one day, just joking around, was like, "Hey, you're the rock and roll beer guy. You're the guy that shows up to shows with beer."
There you go.
And I was like, "Man, that's cheesy, but that's almost enough to like be a brand type of thing." And then I met a musician from the band Killswitch Engage. His name is Adam D. Mm-hmm. We met at a brewery that I was working at, and I was like, "Hey, we should make a beer together." And we did the beer, and then from there, I was like, I've been wanting to start my own podcast. I've been a guest on some, as working in the beer industry. A lot of people would invite me to their podcasts, and I'm like, I'll start my own, call it Rock and Roll Beer Guy, and I'll talk to musicians and whoever else wants to talk to me.
And this is how long ago, roughly?
This was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realize, I forgot in my mind how big Killswitch Engage is. And,
yeah, they're a great band. I did a project with them once. Yeah.
Yeah, they did music for WWE, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. They did one of my songs. It's great. That's a really good band.
Which what was the song that they did?
I'm totally I'm forgetting right now. But I remember being...
Was it CM Punk? I think he did something with CM Punk for a little bit before he got Cult of Personality.
I
don't know.
I honestly have forgotten, which is disgusting, but true. But, interestingly, most of the bands I worked with, outside bands over the years, mm-hmm. I tended to be very unimpressed. It tended to be the same story, that it's one really talented guy mm-hmm. with his friends from high school. And the other guys are, they're kind of hanging on to the handlebars and they're doing their part. But it's really this one guy who's got a reasonable amount of talent. But even then, to your point about, wow, it's tough to make money in the music industry, there are very few guys who go the band route who, and forgive me if this sounds snotty or arrogant, I certainly don't mean it to be. I mean it to be like it's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. Sort of have the staying power to blow it up into a bigger thing. Like mm-hmm. they're really good. They're a good enough leader to get this group of guys together and get them focused long enough to practice and rehearse and actually become a really good band. And that generally leads up to that first album, which all those songs are basically the story of that person's life from 0 to 25 years old. Mm-hmm. But then, they get a little bit of success, they get signed, and now you have a label saying, well, we need a second album in 14 months.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where the shit hits the fan, because they don't know, most of them don't know how to do that. Like they don't know how to write under pressure. And that's why you have so many bands that have this great first album that has all this energy and great ideas and like, wow, that's just a really good song with good lyrics. Mm-hmm. And then number 2 comes out and it's like, wow, this sounds like all the discarded stuff that didn't make the first album.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of material at that point in terms of where to draw from. They put it all out in that first album. And now all you know and all you have to talk about is the fact that you're in a band and you're on tour, Yeah.
And we had, some top, some things that broke into the top 40 on Billboard rock charts. Yeah. It's just really, it's a hard road. And, I don't, and believe me, I say this with all that, with complete humility, because I don't, I still don't understand how I've been able to stay, keep having ideas all this time. I really believe for me, it's pretty much of a spiritual event. I really feel, kind of the conduit through God thing.
Yeah.
So it makes it a lot easier for me to attribute none of it to myself. But it just feels like I got lucky, to be chosen to be one of the conduits. But I get how hard it's brutally hard, because there's so many facets to it. What we were just talking about, it's not just new material. It's like all that fan base, they're expecting better material and some sort of growth, even if they can't verbalize it.
Yeah.
They'll bury you if it just sounds like more of the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to feel like something happened, like wow, his voice has gotten so much better, or there's a really refreshing kind of acoustic vibe to this album, that really is really cool. I like that it's not so headbanging and a little more melodic. And
it's a delicate balance too, because sometimes you cross the line of too much change and then they bury you for that.
Absolutely. Too. Yeah. Yeah. Joni Mitchell late in her career, when she went full on jazz, and now of course she had the success and also the bravery to do that, for which I completely applaud her. But at the same time, she just completely lost her core audience.
Yeah.
Because they were like, what is this? This is, I'm in a jazz club now.
Yeah, you can't change too much. I mean, that happened, to talk about a more modern band, that happened with bands like Korn, where they all of a sudden now they're doing dubstep. If you want to talk about, I wasn't around during that time, but I can imagine, I've heard people upset about King Crimson, how they went from being this crazy prog rock band to kind of a more 80s upbeat, kind of new wavy. For a little bit, they experimented with that.
Much more pop.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
From being really edgy. And that's also one of the most dangerous changes, because if people like you because you're edgy and completely offensive to your parents, and you suddenly move a little to the mainstream, boy, sellout is like the first word that pops up.
Yeah.
Like, I used to like them, but
they sold out. They sold out.
My mom likes their stuff now.
When I was younger, I had a strong opinion of things like that. I would, no, I'm not listening to their new album. They sold out, whatever, had that little punk attitude. But I've definitely, as I've gotten older, gotten over that, because, I've understood the difference between being a sellout and having to monetize your passion in order to keep doing it and not have to have a day job, not have to go work construction or in an office,
Yeah. And add to that, having just a little patience with people and listen to it, because it might be the best pop rock you've ever heard in your life.
There's that too. Yeah.
It might be like they've taken on pop and brought something really fresh to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to make people have an open mind when it comes to music.
No,
especially especially for people like myself, that I'm a big, I'm into some technical metal and progressive stuff that, I try to show my friends, and they're like, "This, I don't even understand what you're showing me. I can't move my head to it," right. or other way around. Like it'll be somebody that's into like some obscure black metal from Sweden, and they're like, "That's commercial garbage. I don't want to hear that."
Yeah, well, but I guess one of the tough things about music is that it's a very emotional. You don't have to be sophisticated to really enjoy it and really have strong opinions about it. It can be as simple as it moves you. Like you were saying, it's like I'm just not into this. I mean, is there a melody or something anytime in our future, or is it just this noise forever? You know, I mean, that's just the way they hear it. And so I tend to just try to be much more patient with it now and say, you know, like, hey, no big deal. It's not your thing. So go listen to something that is your thing. There's a lot of music out there.
Exactly.
I only get touchy about it when people come on with any opinion, whether it be music or politics. If not only don't I like this, but you're an asshole to like it.
Right.
Like you're like, there's something screwy with you.
Well, they have to tag on that attack, you know, that put you down thing, which is, you know, it's unfortunately commonplace these days in social media. Everybody's attacking each other. Everybody like, I don't like, you know, this show, or I love this show and you suck for liking the other show. And you see it in pro wrestling now, you know?
Yeah. You're an idiot.
Yeah. It's so bad.
It's laughably bad, but unfortunately it's utterly true and it's happening. And unfortunately it's one of those things of, what do you do about it? How do you stop it?
I was suggesting I was just talking to Gavin from the band Dredge, and he literally just suggested that we have timeouts. Kind of, you know, recently we had the shutdown with 6 hours, no Instagram or Facebook, WhatsApp, because they went down. He's like, we should do that on purpose. Idea. On purpose, yeah. Guess what? Today, no Instagram. It's just down.
Every Monday, no social media.
Mm-hmm. Just a little blackout, like nap time. Just take a break. Yeah. You know, it's really sad to see is the wrestling community being so, they're one of the most toxic fan bases I've seen lately. And it sucks because what got me back into pro wrestling was the independent crowds. I started going to smaller independent shows here in LA and seeing the excitement of the crowd, and like everybody was very welcoming and very nice. And seeing where it is now, where people are just attacking each other on you know, these wrestling forums. Like, if you like WWE, you're an idiot, and if you like AEW, you're a moron, you're a mark. It's like, why can't we just enjoy it?
I really don't follow it, and interestingly, I've never followed it because I've never been a wrestling fan. And you know, I got involved sheer happenstance. But I think that ended up being an incredible asset because I was never a mark kind of person for it. So I always was able to approach it from a distance, like scoring a film or something. It's like, it's not my film. It's
right.
I frequently have said when people are saying, well, like if you don't really love it, then how can you write music for it? And I said, well, wait a second. Do you think that John Williams is a complete astronomy buff because he did the score to E.T.? You know, right. Do you think those two things have any correlation whatsoever?
He knows everything about extraterrestrials.
Yeah. And, you know, there's no relationship. And as a matter of fact, I think having that distance, I believe that kind of artistic distance is really a positive because you don't get lost in it. So you can see I felt like I could see the character, but I could equally see how this fan base sees that character or wants to, or is hoping to see that character. And then that often helped me in terms of, okay, is this piece of music, there's direction in all music. Is this theme coming from this guy? Is it him saying, this is me? Or is it the crowd looking at this character?
Right.
You know, I would say that Steve Austin is very much, it's coming from him. This is me, you know, because he says basically fuck you, and the music says fuck you.
Right.
Undertaker is like a shared experience. It's a soundtrack that's happening. It's not, there's no kind of identity or there's no sense, I believe, that Undertaker chose his music. Like, this is the music I want to be playing.
When it plays, he arrives.
Yes, exactly. This is just an emotional description of what the mood in the room is when he shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I loved having the distance. And by the way, are we recording or not recording?
We've been recording this whole
good.
time.
Great, good. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to keep all that in. Let me give a proper introduction.
Sorry about the swears, everybody.
Oh, no, we can swear. It's fine. Yeah. This is an adult show.
Okay.
But yeah, let me give you a proper intro. I feel like it's important for anyone to understand. And it's also, do you feel that that aspect of showmanship, whether it's pro wrestling or MMA or anything like that, that like people like Bruce Buffer, that they give that big boisterous intro, like, do you feel that that's something that is an art that should always be there? Some people don't care, but I feel it adds to the whole thing to have somebody give a proper introduction.
I guess I'm open to all forms of the introduction. You know, there are scenarios certainly where a classic introduction really helps. You know, being introduced for a special award at the Academy Awards or something. It's really nice for someone who has some known connection to that person to come out and, you know, give a little background. You know, Joe's been an actor since he was 12 years old. You know, he's been nominated for an Academy Award 18 times. And, you know, it builds anticipation.
Sure.
But a glass break builds anticipation too.
That's true. So as you hear that glass break, it's a quick anticipation.
It's just a different language being used for the introduction. But in the broadest sense, I completely agree with you that introductions are, I think, respectful, and they kind of prime the emotional pump of the people who are already basically favorably disposed to the person being introduced. But it settles people down a little bit and reminds them, like, oh yeah, I really like this guy. I've forgotten he'd been nominated so many times for an Academy Award. That's amazing, right. But also not surprising because he's such a great actor. Right. And so when he comes out and he gets the award, it just makes it ties all the loose ends up and makes it all make sense. Like, holy crow. I mean, if anyone in the universe deserves this award, it's him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good too for just, he doesn't have to come out and explain himself, you know? Yeah.
As you know, been up for 18 Academy Awards. Yeah. You know, then it becomes tasteless.
Yeah, it becomes kind of pompous, you know. Well, that being said, welcome everyone to the RRBG podcast. I'm keeping all that stuff in because it was great. Okay. But I'm here with the legendary Jim Johnston, composer of music that you have definitely heard. If you're watching this podcast, you've heard his music. That's it. There's not, and that's a wild statement to say. Like, there's bands that I like that I can say, you know what, you haven't heard that band or you haven't heard this band, but I guarantee that almost everyone that watches this show and everyone that listens knows your music, and that's got to have like a crazy feeling of accomplishment.
It is. I'm really proud of all that music that I wrote and my contribution to that whole time. And what you were talking about earlier with the whole pro wrestling community fan base now being in a pretty gnarly mood. You know, I hate when things get really ugly, and certainly if they get violent, it's wholly wrong. But at the same time, I understand their frustration. I understand what you said about you've been enjoying these smaller shows, smaller companies, because it gets back to what WWE and WWF was and what it certainly isn't today. So to have this thing that was so revered kind of fall off the rails, where all these people are, I feel so sorry for the current crop of talent there, because I feel that they're being served so inadequately and so poorly. Is there are no breakout stars because they're not putting the right combination of things together to create stars. I'm sure there are stars there. I mean, I'm absolutely confident there are people in the right. I remind everybody that before Stone Cold Steve Austin before Steve broke out and became, one of the biggest stars in the game, he was the ringmaster. And, he was
Stunning Steve before that.
Yeah, he was a pretty low card player. And there's something about truth that characters have to find an element to their character that's not a character, that has to be part of who they are. And then I think the next most important thing is there has to be a piece of music which is a score to that character, that every time people hear it, they feel that character. It's not just thinking about it. They feel that character. They feel what that character is about. And one reason I always fought wrestlers using mainstream music was because I think it absolutely defeats the purpose, because people have different emotional associations with those songs. So a song comes on, that's whatever, an AC/DC song. The guy comes out to that. I think it makes him feel all puffy. I've got an AC/DC song. But the problem is that half the fan base is thinking about some association they have. This is the night I had that car accident. This is the first night I kissed my girlfriend.
Right,
So you've effectively taken them out of the story, and now they are not thinking about that guy. So when Taker's music plays or Steve's music plays, people are only thinking about Steve Austin. They're not thinking about when they kissed their girl. They're thinking about Steve Austin, what he did last week. I wonder what the hell crazy thing he's going to do tonight. And that's what you want. You want that kind of, and it's not just intellectual focus. It's got to be emotional focus. You have to, Star Wars works because that Darth Vader's bad and Luke Skywalker's good, and you want the Force to win.
Right.
If you don't care that the Force wins, then boy, the movie's dead on arrival. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, wow.
And talking about music and its effect on the whole thing, you hear that Imperial
your voice
March.
just dropped out.
Oh, did it? Can you hear me?
Hold on, let me check something. Say something.
Check.
One, there you are. Okay,
all
great.
Right.
All right.
So I was saying that the music, when you hear that Imperial March, the bad guy's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't even need to show him on the screen. You just hear the song, you're like, uh-oh, he's here.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's the power of it. It gets to the point where Luke Skywalker's on a different planet alone, in the woods, and suddenly you hear, and it's like, uh-oh.
Something ominous is coming.
Did he beam himself up to this planet, or what's going on?
Yeah.
So maybe it turns out it was just a thought Luke was having, but still, that's the power of that kind of theme. And so the point being, I don't get what's happened that's created this thing where it's like 100% generic wrestler number 12 coming out with absolutely non-memorable, indescribable, generic noise theme number 14.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and I kind of I've witnessed this happen to a lot of corporations and big companies that, they grow to a certain level of success where they're just kind of, trying to maintain that success by just keeping the machine going. And I get that. But what I don't get is when they actually have something of value, they actually have an interesting character, and they just completely squash it. Like they did with The Fiend. I thought that was one of the most creative things they've done in a very long time, a very creative looking character. He's He's visually stunning. The music is great. You know, it's his song, you know, even though it's from a band that, you know, wasn't something that was constructed for him specifically. Like, I never heard that band. They picked a band that was kind of unknown. And so that song became his. And so they had all this potential, and then they just got rid of, like, they just made him lose and make him go away. Like, they don't do anything to pump him up. Same with like Finn Balor. He had his great entrance where everybody was going, you know, they put their hands in the air, tremendous talent. And then what? They just make, you know, they make these decisions to completely squash the only good creative things that they have and keep the corporate machine running. It's weird. That I don't get.
It is weird. As I say, I really barely follow it, so I don't even know who you're talking about with those guys. But I think I will look up their music just to
the Fiend.
See some example of something that you thought like at least was kind of working.
Yeah, the Fiend was the Fiend. Bray Wyatt was one, and the other one is the Demon Finn Balor. And these are two very old school in the sense of, you know, the over the top characters that kind of like the Undertaker had. Like, it was an over the top thing where it felt surreal, supernatural, and it had a vibe to it. And then they just completely squandered that opportunity to replace it with, you know, like you said, generic wrestler number whatever with the lame.
It's a pretty political scenario and lots of big egos involved.
Yeah.
I noticed even when I was still there would be times when they would not give good storylines to people. And yet, because of their own charisma, people would start to kind of break out a little bit, but they wouldn't support that.
Yeah.
And then the catch-22 was, then they would accuse the guy, well, he can't grow. It's well, he can't grow because he's not getting good storylines, or you're not
watering him,
or you're not putting up him against good adversaries. I mean, it's self-perpetuating, self-creating. But the one who pays the price is the guy who had something going, and boom, next thing you read he's released.
Yeah. Released, made them. And when they release someone, they make sure that they embarrass them on the way out. I've noticed too. They'll make them lose a bunch of matches in a really bad way, and then now they're released. It's like, it just seems petty.
Well, it is.
Yeah, it is. And so I know you've been on record saying, you know, the WWE isn't using your work anymore, they're using your work, but you're not on the payroll anymore. Yeah. And was that separation, like, I guess, was it amicable? It wasn't amicable, was it?
Oh no, Vince fired me.
Why?
He put it in that he wasn't renewing my contract, but that is, I mean, that's semantics.
Yeah. That's a politically correct way of saying it.
Yeah. But why? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. It was time for me to go for me. So, honestly, to some degree, he did me a favor. But
gotcha.
But still, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean you're not disappointed. And after doing something for more than 30 years, there's the biggest obstacle I ran into. It's sort of, I guess, like getting a divorce, where you've been with this person for 30 years and maybe it's not all happy and perfect, but this has become the habit of your life. Yeah. You know, what you get up and do every day and what you spend all your time thinking about. You know, for all those years, I'd sit down at the piano or pick up a guitar or sit down at the drums, whatever. And it'd be, you play something, you go, hey, that would be a good theme, so, record the idea on my phone and save it for something. So to break that habit, it's just like suddenly one day your life is different and you have no responsibility in that direction. humans don't change direction quite that easily.
Yeah.
So
And
it
we're
took some time, and now it's great. I mean, I in my studio all day, every day. I'm writing music I love, and but it took a while to effectively make that turn.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing that it happened prior to this whole pandemic situation,
Yeah.
where now a lot of people are going through that, but because of the pandemic, they've had to make complete adjustments to their lifestyle, people working from home,
Yeah.
people that, all that stuff. So it's kind of, it was like an advantage for you, I guess, because you had more time to, now during the pandemic, you can thrive because you're already figured it out. Whereas, everybody now is still trying to figure it out.
Absolutely true. A really huge stroke of luck for me. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right on the point there.
So in terms of what you're working on now, because, I gave you the introduction, but if there's anybody that's watching this and doesn't know, I mean, you've created professional wrestling themes for pretty much everyone that anybody knows that's worth a damn. And now, what is the music you're making now? It's not for that. So what are you looking into in terms of?
It's sort of evolved. At first, it was sort of all over the map because I was probably much more creatively lost than I gave credence to, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then I started to get into a realization that it's really nice to come into the studio and be able to write whatever I want to write, and to not have to write songs that are, bombastic, egotistical, look how great I am, I'm going to rip your head off things.
Yeah.
So I've been working on a lot of orchestral music, a lot of sort of trailer things, because my favorite music at the end of the day have always been soundtracks. I just love that. So most recently, I've been preparing for a big orchestral session I'm going to be doing in November, about mid-November. So, and it takes an extraordinary amount of work to prepare the music for, a 60 to 70 piece orchestra. So that's what I'm doing right now. And fortunately, I did well enough throughout the years at WWE and saved my pennies where there wasn't that instant need to, like, you need to find a job, in the next 6 hours or all hell's going to break loose.
Right.
So having that freedom has been an absolute blessing from God. So, so it's been nice to have this time. It's like, I've been working since I was 13 years old. So it was like the first period in my life where it really took some time to get used to not feeling the pressure of you have to be doing something.
Right. Yeah.
You have to be doing something. And that was a combination of circumstantial, where my life has gone. And it's also my upbringing. My family's from Arkansas, sort of a classic, very self-sufficient vibe, like you don't depend on other people and you work hard and you pull your weight. And so
yeah,
that unfortunately creates serious workaholism.
Yeah.
And it's, which is great because you accomplish a lot, but it's not so great because other parts of your life suffer.
Right.
Because you're not tending to some of these other very important areas, because you're so focused on your work.
Right. Yeah, it's a standard, when you have parents that are, kids that have parents that are hardworking, that are on the road all the time. Like even a lot of the pro wrestlers like that you've worked with, they have families at home and they kind of have to, take care of business. And that means we don't get to go watch the first soccer game or watch the, baseball. And, we don't get to spend that time, that quality family time, which is so important.
So important. Yeah. So
Well,
it's been an interesting road. My whole life's been an interesting road. I've been a lucky guy.
I'm glad to hear that you've actually had some time to yourself to work on you and have to put your work into yourself and your music.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to this new music you're working on, are you going to put it out in like an album form? Are you looking at labels to maybe do a vinyl record, something like that? Because there's a lot of composers that lately have been, they've been getting notoriety in terms of just being a composer, which is something that was kind of a lost art for a while. But like you think of like a Hans Zimmer can do a concert where he plays all his, soundtracks and whatnot. So
you're right. That really disappeared for a while because it became the music industry became a vehicle for producers.
Mm-hmm.
And because when we got into the whole music being very computer driven, very loop driven, suddenly the traditional composer sort of fell off the table a little bit in importance. And also we got pretty far away from songs with any sort of a traditional melody structure. Except maybe for country music, which has always towed the line there.
That's the name of my favorite country song. No, I'm just kidding. Towing the line.
So it's nice that that's coming back. And yes, so I've been speaking to people and there's kind of get a lot of different like pots in the fire right this second. And a label thing is one of the possibilities, a concert thing. The concert thing's really scary for me because I really have difficulty with the stage fright issue. It's just it's so sad really because I would love to do that. I would love to put together a big event and play a bunch of new stuff, play a bunch of classic WWE stuff, maybe classic WWE stuff in an orchestral form even. But it means I have to get up in front of an audience and it just scares the living hell out of me. I mean, I literally get nervous right now. I bet my blood pressure and heartbeat just went up just to say those words.
Jeez. Well, I mean that's probably why a lot of musicians are struggling with like drug addictions because they use that to get on stage. They'll take drugs and alcohol to calm the nerves to get on stage, it's a terrifying idea.
Unfortunately, I escaped that trap. But yeah, I think you're right. And that's, and if you're a band touring and that's your lifestyle that you're leading, 5 or 6 days a week, that's makes it very easy to get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. Now, there's an idea that I saw. There's a Japanese composer that does video game music that I really enjoy, and I saw him live. And the way that he did it, maybe a good suggestion for you, is like they had the orchestra, the 24-piece orchestra, whatnot. They had their conductor, and they just performed the music. And then in the middle of the set, he came out and did one song. He played, he played violin and piano on like one song, just so that the crowd sees him and they do the thing. And
it really is me.
Yeah, and then he leaves again, and the concert continues, or it could be the last thing that happens. But I think it'd be cool to you just come out for like a one guitar solo, you know what I mean, or something like that.
That's a good suggestion, though. I will put that into the oven and see what comes out. No, I mean because it's something I'm not kidding when I say it's something I would love to do because I absolutely believe that the real power of music is people hearing it. And this whole block with me extends beyond just live music because it's it's just some sort of deep psycho insecurity where it's very difficult for me to put, like, I've done so much music now since I left WWE, but I've only put a few pieces on my website, and it's so difficult for me to put it out there. I mean, as I've said, I'll write a new song and I have difficulty playing it for my wife, because even with her privately, I get all nervous and I hem and haw, and it's like, oh, well, you know, it's not quite done yet. And, you know, this is just a rough kind of version of it. And
yeah, I've had that happen to me as well, man. When I was in a band, it was always that, like, oh, let me hear your new song. I'm like, well,
not ready.
Not ready. And, you know, the worst is I used to sing in the band, so I whenever we would go out and there was any kind of karaoke situation, it was always like, come on, man, aren't you a singer? Like, come on. I'm like, no, leave me alone.
Yeah, this is your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Get up there. Did you?
No, go on.
Did you get up there? Karaoke?
It depends. If I had a few beers.
Enough beers?
Yeah, if I had a couple beers, I'll do it.
You are the beer guy. Come on.
I am the beer guy, yeah. And, you know, it's funny. I've had to struggle lately where I don't want that. Like, it's who I am and personality and all that. But I have run into a few people that when I ask to go hang out with them, they assume that me going to hang out with them is going to get them drunk. And I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I just want to hang out with you. You know, I don't want the
just hang out and talk. And
I don't need. You don't need to drink anything. It's fine. I had a couple questions I wanted to ask, just kind of like to touch a base on some of the stuff you've done. So, do you have? So the first one, I have so many, but there's. Are there any anecdotes when you were doing the Shawn Michaels theme, the "Sexy Boy" song? I
didn't write that. Jimmy Hart wrote that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. It showed up. There was a list of songs, like your top 10, and that was there. So I don't know why. But
well, you know, a lot of times it gets a little confused because I did write a theme for Shawn Michaels, and that was D-Generation X was originally written. I wrote for Shawn Michaels. And then by the time it was out there, he had hooked up with Hunter, and sort of had become a group entity very quickly.
So, okay, then let's talk about the DX song. So I found a lot of, the first time I ever heard it, I found a lot of similarities to Rage Against the Machine style, the vocals specifically.
Because Chris Warren, who did the singing, that's what he did, and I definitely was trying to do something in that style that was, you know, the white rock rapper vibe.
Yeah, it fit the mood because DX's whole thing was anti-establishment, whereas Rage Against the Machine that's the thing. So it was fun to do because it was,
and what is I think the best trivia about that piece of music was. Somehow I got away with something that there's no way I would get away with, which is seems have a, you know, Undertaker bell, boom, music, glass break, music, you know, it's right into it. It's not like, hey, let's hang out and have a nice little intro thing. And I just became fascinated. And I think part of it was Chris's voice. He just has this snide, you know, implied "go screw yourself" thing with anything he says, and so just the really the kick drum only. I was it was playing in the studio, and I was doing something else, and then I was just sort of thinking, like, wait a second, this might be, and this happens so much. This is so interesting how this happens when you're putting music together. Happy accidents. Boy, do I love happy accidents. You know, I wasn't trying to write an intro. I accidentally left the machine still running. So here's the.
Yeah.
And so I just find myself getting into the mood of that. And I found myself starting to say stuff like, you know, You can't tell us what to do. You know, and so I set up a long loop of that. I set up 2 microphones, one with Chris facing me. And I said, Chris, just with your snide, crazy voice, just repeat everything I said. And I just sat there. We stood there for, I bet, 15 minutes of my just thinking of anything I could think of. You know, you can't tell me what to wear. You can't tell me what to do. Hey, you know, go screw yourself. Go fuck yourself. You know, everything. And then put it in an intro, and I loved it. But I thought, like, Vince is going to say, well, wait a second. What's with the 20-second intro before we get into the hook of the song?
Right.
But fortunately, everybody liked it. And to the earlier point we talked about, it so effectively built anticipation about them coming out.
Yeah. So how much research goes into when you're going, and how much involvement does the talent have when you're trying to come up with something for them? Like, do you watch their matches? Like, how do you prepare to understand the character? Is it just a sheet of paper that Vince hands you, like, this is the character, figure it out? Or are you like doing any kind of like watching, you know, some of their work or previous work, or trying to get into that mindset to come up with something for them?
It's extraordinarily small amount of information. It was never so organized as I would get a sheet of paper like this month's themes to work on. You know,
Right.
A guy who's you know, a garbage man who you know, hates garbage or something. It was more, much more shoot from the hip. That we got a new guy coming in Raw, and we need something for him, and you know, and that's it.
Jeez.
You know, so you know, maybe I get a picture, but a lot of times when new guys came in, they're generally speaking, they were reinventing his character. Most people back then didn't come in with their previous gimmick from wherever they came from.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they got rebranded in the WWE universe with something new. Mm-hmm. And many times not all that happy about it. But I would, if I could see video of previous things, at least it would show me how they move, which was important to me. You know,
body language. Yeah.
Body language, but what's the speed they move? You know, are they a big hulking guy? You know, so it's going to be a dum, 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 or is it a crazy warrior kind of guy who's you know, frenetic and moving fast? And so that's a huge clue right there. And then I guess the next biggest thing for me was, is this a rock theme? Is this a hip hop thing? Is this an orchestral thing? And generally, a lot of times I had a hunch immediately, but a lot of times it just was, you know, sitting down at the piano or guitar and start playing stuff and see. It literally is as weird and as simple as suddenly I would play something and say, like, oh, that's that guy.
Okay. Was there a lot of involvement? Was there any one specific performer that like insisted? Because I saw your picture you posted on social media of you with Sean and Taker in the studio. So like, were they the ones that would be the most persistent in like being involved, like sitting in there with you and like giving you ideas for the music at all?
Definitely not. No. I'd love to see that picture. I don't know what picture that is.
Oh, there's a picture of you online. I saw.
Yeah. Send it to me if you find it. I'd be curious. I don't remember being in the studio with both of them at the same time.
Maybe it wasn't a studio. I might be
Maybe
crazy.
It was backstage at some event or something.
Perhaps.
Yeah. No. I mean, you don't have to do it now, but
no,
so
was there anyone that kind of? Well, here we go. This is the one I was looking at. It looks like you're on a board.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that was, I wonder if that was the sessions for when everyone was in New York, we were doing, I'd written a song called like If You Only Knew, and everybody had a line. I'd written it so that everybody had a line in this song.
Oh, okay. So they weren't they weren't like involved in the creative process. They were just there to record or do work, I guess.
Yeah, that I think was that event.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it honestly, it was generally a complete nightmare if talent got big enough to have the clout to say, to Vince or to Kevin Dunn, the executive producer, that like, hey, I want to sit with Jim and talk about music. And because the general difficulty there was they would want music that they like to listen to in their car or work out to in the gym.
But it doesn't fit the
I would
character.
be put in a position of saying like, well, but that's not your character. Do you think that Harrison Ford pushes to have the music he listens to in his car as the score to his next movie? I mean, it just doesn't work like that. But
yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad that worked out that way. I mean, I can see where they would want to. Like, if I was a pro wrestler, I would want to sit down with you to like, let's do it together. But that's also because I'm also musically inclined. So I feel like that,
that at least gets it in the ballpark of we'd have something to talk about. But,
right. Well, that's great. So another question I had was, I've noticed that there's a different version of some of your songs out there. So is there any one particular theme that you had to rework the most? Like which one? Because like I know there's different versions of the Stone Cold theme and there's different versions of the Rocks theme out there. So which one of those did you have to rework the most?
I think probably more than anything because of the longevity of his career that Undertaker probably had the most versions. However, overall, the fundamental composition stayed pretty much the same.
Yeah.
But there were different levels of how much organ and how much choir and how much percussion and that kind of thing. Trying to think of,
like that guitar solo in the Rocks theme. How many times did you have to record that? Or how many different versions of that exist in the world?
I think only 2 times really that I had all the material there, but that I changed the sound when I'd remix it.
Okay.
So Triple H had, was very, very involved because he was a big star, but also even more involved when he became involved with Stephanie and ended up getting married and, then became really kind of up the corporate ladder. So he had an unusual amount of say in his music. But I would say overall he was, even though he could have been more forward with me, I would say overall he was pretty respectful of my turf and pretty much let me come up with stuff. But he had a lot of different themes over the years.
Yeah.
He had the Hunter Hearst theme, the harpsichord theme, and then he was a major player of DX for a long time, and then My Time.
Did you work with Motorhead at all when they brought them in for him?
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. And they did 3 of my songs for him. So
I may not have those online.
King of Kings,
Mm-hmm.
The Game, and Evolution.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I remember that one. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to an hour, so I wanted to start wrapping up, but I wanted to go back to what you're doing now. You know, we talked a lot about your previous work, but you've had a lot of interviews where you talk about your previous work. So what you're doing now, did you give yourself a time frame in terms of releasing?
I'd like to get this orchestral music out before the end of the year. And
Okay.
then I'm also, I'll let you know for your listeners that I'm also doing a project where I'm doing sort of an EP, five. I don't know if they're going to be lyric songs or just instrumentals, probably half and half, or 3 and 2, of essentially themes.
Okay.
And I guess you would sadly say maybe there's some spite in that, but
Okay.
I wanted to do it just to kind of remind everybody what themes are and how they work. They're not the same genre of music as a song.
Right.
It's different, and it's like an amalgam mixing songs and soundtrack. You know, it's not just about the lyrics, and it's not so much a story. It's talking about a feeling that kind of elevates you or is threatening, but it's very cinematic in a way.
Okay. Now, do you have any directors that you want to work with? Because I know you've mentioned you like soundtracks and of that nature. So would you want to work with somebody specific? It doesn't have to be a director, but just a creator that you admire, that you would love to make music for or with?
Well, I guess more than anybody, I would work with Quentin Tarantino only because I love that he just he feels like a guy who's an interesting combination of knows what he wants, but is also open to suggestions from a composer that like he wants to try new things, and it's something. I'll throw a compliment to Vince that my guess is that they're the same on this thing, that Vince comes in with all guns blazing with what he wants, like this is what's going to happen, we're doing this, and his music's going to be this, boom boom boom. And it's important to come back with a version of that which he has asked for, quite specifically. But if you come back with a second thing and I would say like, hey, I get this over here, but just throwing it out there, this kind of seems like the obvious way to go. What, maybe a little too simple. And I came up with this that I thought was a little different. And I know not at all what you're expecting, but I'm going to play it for you and you tell me what you think. Now, that doesn't mean if I was brave enough or stupid enough to do that, walk in front of the train, that I won the battle. I didn't always win the battle.
Right. Yeah.
But it was great because the man loved to be surprised. And I think the truth is he has a reputation for being such a hard ass because he doesn't get creatively surprised a lot. So he got into a place long ago where he feels like to get what he wants, he has to absolutely spell it out. But he loves to be surprised. It's like, holy crow, boy, I was not thinking that. And I can't even tell you why, but it works. It works. Let's do that. I just get the feeling that Tarantino is the same kind of guy, that he has a vision for all of his films about what they're about, but that if you throw him a curveball and said like, I just heard this. What do you think? That, I mean, he'll certainly tell you the truth, I bet. But
For sure, yeah.
But just seems like a guy who'd like to be surprised. I don't know, but there are lots of people I'd love to work with. I love films so much. They're a really magical medium, I think, for human beings. And I think the scores are so important because the score is what keeps you in that world. It's like you start to watch a film and it's like walking through a door, and the score keeps you in that world and doesn't let you out. Or if it's a good score, it doesn't let you out until the story's resolved. And in an ideal world, it makes you not want to leave that world.
Yeah.
Which is why you buy the soundtrack downstream, listen in your car, and you're back in that world, and it feels good.
Yep. I love collecting like records, vinyl records, and soundtracks. Just put them on, and I could just replay certain scenes in my head, while doing dishes or something. I could just listen to it and kind of get into it.
Yeah, I've been listening to Edward Herman's stuff a lot recently. He was a magician. You should check out some of his classic stuff. It definitely sounds very film noir dated now, but man, oh man, that guy, he really had it going.
I'll definitely check some out for sure.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody that's listening and watching, where should they go to keep track of what you're doing, to keep an eye out for this new release when you have it ready?
Just my website, jimjohnston.com.
Jim Johnston. Is it the Jim Johnston or just Jim Johnston?
No, there's a guy out there. There are a couple of guys who have websites or Twitter accounts and all sorts of stuff that are masquerading as me. There's one like The Real Jim Johnston and The Jim Johnston. No, mine is just jimjohnston.com.
Okay.
Very
cool.
Straightforward. I got the real website.
Be wary of the fake Jim Johnsons out there, folks.
Yeah, well, I'd love to think that it would become immediately obvious, but I haven't been to those websites, so I don't know.
Oh, well, keep an eye out, guys. I'm excited to hear that you have new music coming. Great. As I'm sure everyone who has talked to you or interviewed you has said, I'm a huge, huge fan of your work. I was that kid with the portable CD player listening to the themes at school. I've always been a fan.
I'm sure your teachers love that.
Oh, yeah. I've always been a fan, man. I've always found it super important.
Thank you very much. It's really kind of you, and it's kind of you to have me on your show. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, and I'm glad to hear you're still working and looking forward to what you got coming.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care of yourself. Stay safe.
I will. You too.
Cheers.